Hello, and welcome to the Everything PT podcast with Matt Taylor and Daniel Bodkin. Please do not consider anything you hear to be medical advice, just a couple of guys ranting about everything PT. Enjoy the show.
Matt, how are you doing today?
Daniel, I'm good. I'm realizing that my lighting is it's not showing off what hair I have left in my
You're blending
fair
in.
amount behind me.
I
So
want you- What is that you got behind you?
that is a West Virginia black bear back there. Yeah, I took with a bow.
You bought that at the local supermarket?
I hit it with a vehicle, and yeah. I think you're actually legally allowed to do that in West Virginia, just so you know.
No, you seriously hunted that?
Yeah, that's a bow kill a couple years ago on our family's property. Just right place, the right time. So very lucky shot.
You are much manlier than I am. I'll say that for sure.
I like to tell people I wrestled it to death, but they don't believe me.
Well, that's a good
Oh,
one.
good.
If you look behind me, I moved positions
Yes.
today. And any of you fellow nerds out there, you might recognize some of my, Harry Potter and Narnia and Hunger Games. What you can't see is behind the computer. I have a whole bookshelf of Star Wars expanded universe novels. So super nerd right here.
Yes, you're after my heart with the Divergent series back there, Daniel. So appreciate that.
So today we're going to talk about when do we know our patients are ready for discharge or a return to activity or work or a return to a sport.
Yeah, I'm excited to get going. We're going to talk a lot about non-athletes, and then we'll get into some of the athletic population too. Absolutely. A little bit later on.
And Matt, we have a little good news, a little surprise for our couple listeners out there.
Yes. What good news is that, Daniel? Tell me.
We got a sponsor.
All right. That's incredible. After 4 or 5 episodes, it's awesome, man.
So now we have to live up to the hype.
Probably drop us after 2 episodes.
Yeah. So great chance now to tell everybody, please like the video, subscribe to us, share it with your friends. That way we feel like we're not ripping off these companies that are going to sponsor us. So who's our sponsor?
Yeah, CSMI. I hear you know them pretty well, Daniel.
Know them very well.
Yeah, our friends we both know and love Isokinics, and they appear to be the leader so far in Isokinetics. We're really happy with our
killing it right now.
Our bio.
So they make the Humac Norm Isokinetic system.
Mm-hmm.
They can also update an old machine, whether it's an old Cybex or a Biodex. And you can either purchase a refurbished machine, or if you have a machine just sitting around your clinic that's still, using the software from 15 plus years ago, they can They can do a lot of upgrades for those nowadays. So if you hear us, plugging CSMI, it's because of that. And I've had a relationship with them for years. I was actually just in Minnesota yesterday in St. Paul installing a machine at Tria Orthopaedics in Woodbury, Minnesota. So I got a little bit cold. I had to bring a jacket. Now I'm back to sunny Atlanta wearing my shorts and t-shirts again.
Were you saying things like A and moose loose on your hoose, things like that?
By far, my favorite accent of Americans is that Minnesota, Wisconsin accent.
Yeah. It was very unique,
very, very present. I have a lot of Army buddies from the Northeast, from the South, and you get those accents. But my favorite accent has always been from the Great North, Minnesota, Wisconsin.
Pick it out.
Yeah,
you can pick it out a mile away for sure.
It's a fun one.
Yeah.
So let's talk. A patient is getting ready for discharge, and we can fill in the blank with any pathology at this point. They're kind of nearing the end of their plan of care. How do we know when they're ready to actually be done?
Well, I'm going to pick on back pain just because I feel like all the therapists out there can relate, see just tons of back pain too. So for me, when I feel like a patient is ready to go for back pain, we do initial testing and we do some dynamometry, whether it's the mid-thigh pull or something else, an exercise tolerance goal or photo or some other questionnaire. But so we want to see those numbers increase over the course of however long, and each patient very specific, very different too. So, but yeah, it's very different for everyone. I think it's a challenging question, but I think at discharge we want to show that this patient is progressing and they've gained X here in
Mhm.
their mid thigh pull, so or their
So
or
what are some
whatever
of,
it
do you have
is.
any metrics or goals that you want them to perform on that?
Yeah, so we use the photo focus on therapeutic outcomes a lot. That gives us a really good prediction of like the average um, plan of care it takes for an episode of back pain or shoulder pain or post surgical or something like that. So that's something nice to educate the patient with, and it gives us a nice example of what we can expect,
Mhm.
because we really want to set the patient's expectations on that very first day too. And whatever the patient is just having a hard time doing, like the example of, I think you mentioned gardening or housework or picking
Mhm.
up something that's heavy. They need to pick up a big heavy pot. So we want to train heavier than they actually need to in order to perform that household task. What else? The tug, 5 times sit to stand, 2-minute walk test. Those are all things that we use for like the regular Joe household guy or woman to get back to just regular daily activities. So what about you, Daniel, for
I
something
like
like
to
that?
replicate their activity. For
It's
our
a great one.
athletes, we have all these great tests and battery of tests that we can do, but for something like, spine pain, hip pain, and arthritic knee, whatever it
Yeah.
is, I try to replicate whatever their activity goals are and, turn those into my interventions, break down whatever activity it is to its most basic forms, and that will be some of the exercises and then piece it all together to challenge them in that. So the first time they have to load their back, and I'll use the example of gardening because we're going to use that because it's an easy one. I saw that a lot when I was in Nashville. I
Yeah.
don't want the first time they have to lift a 40-pound bag of soil and carry it across their yard the first time they're actually doing it. So I'll try to replicate that. But we first start with basics, teaching a hip hinge, teaching how to engage the abdominals, brace the core with a hip hinge. And even before that, we're just getting that pain to subside first so we can build it. So it's all on progressing that plan of care visit to visit.
I think it depends a lot on the patient's confidence too.
Mhm.
You've seen someone who's just extremely fearful of falling before, right? The
Oh
last
yeah.
thing you want to do is for them to graduate therapy and they just still have that fear of falling too. So I think patient's confidence goes a lot into a really
Mhm.
common question I ask a lot of people with 0 to 100%. How prepared do you feel for discharge in the next few weeks? And that's
Mhm.
really telling because they're like, oh, nowhere close, not even close. And some people are like, yeah, I feel good about this. Let's do it.
Where you live, there's a lot of ice. You get a lot of snow and ice, and that very different from here in Atlanta or when I was in Florida. That's something they never even think about. Anybody above uh, the winter line essentially has to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I would say 3 weeks ago, me and one of our employees went out and helped scoop someone up off the because they had a fall on the ice right in our parking lot, which is just like red flags. But got off the bus and went down. We helped them up. They actually became a patient of ours
There-
later on, which is kind of funny. We were able to help,
when I
but yeah,
was in
you're
the
absolutely
clinic,
right.
we had a computerized balance system by
Mm.
CSMI.
Hey,
It was a really good. 'Cause I like to do testing on there, the CTSIB, but also a multi-directional limits of stability test, and we
hmm
would show that when we tested you in that first week of therapy, you scored X, and now it's 10 weeks out, and you're scoring this, and show
yeah.
them where they've improved, and having an objective test so they can see what they've made improvements on is good for building that confidence.
That's a great point. Yeah, and like questionnaires, I mentioned we use photo. I use that to help illustrate it with graphs. And what, like the TSK 11 for kinesiophobia. Of course, that's in the sports section. KOOS, and you can show them. You're absolutely right. Even if it's range of motion, you had only had 80 degrees of knee flexion on day one, and you're at 115 for an arthritic knee. You're doing much better.
You
So
mentioned the
keep it up.
mid-thigh pull earlier too for your low back pain patients.
Oh yeah,
That's a big one for showing them how much they've improved and how much they're capable of.
yeah. Because I over and over again, I will tell people, how much do you think you did? And they're like, oh, you know, 50 pounds maybe. And I'm like, well, you got 190 pounds. You're strong. You are you're very able and capable body person. So I think it just builds your right confidence. And they're like, oh wow, I can lift that 40-pound bag of cat litter, So
And
you're
it's a
absolutely
ton
right.
of communications too, because just sticking with the low back pain patient, knowing that when I'm, practicing it in a PT clinic with perfect form, I'm able to lift that. But what if I just sat at the computer for 6 hours and I get up and while I'm up, oh, let me bend over and pick this up when my back's been in this terrible position? It might be very different then. So breaking down the different scenarios they might come across is important.
I think that's one of our biggest skills as a clinician is like, what does this patient really want to do? How do we pick it apart piece by piece and actually get them to do this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
On the flip side, sometimes I like to use, we'll get into isokinetics as well. I love using isokinetics or even just a handheld dynamometer. I like to use that on my patients that are a little too confident. I would see it a lot with some of my partial medial meniscectomy patients. And they're 3 weeks post-op, they're feeling great. They think they're ready to get back to, when I was in Nashville, there was a lot of automotive plants. They think they're ready to get back to 12 hours on their feet, 6 days a week.
Yeah.
Or, hey, I'm ready to get back to running how I was before. So having something to show them that you're feeling great, but your strength, you're only, you have a 40% difference on that surgical side. That maybe you're a little overconfident. And a lot of that too is they haven't been pushed to those levels. They're doing their easy exercises in rehab. And there's a big discrepancy between rehab exercises and somebody, now we'll use CrossFit, going back to CrossFit or high level of strength at the gym, or somebody who wants to get back to running a half marathon because they did one 3 months ago and they have another one coming up and they want to get back to it. There's a lot of steps that need to take place in between.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's normal to go through, the rehab curve. I always say is jagged, but it's going up and down. The road to get there is it's not linear by any stretch too. So if someone does have a flare up, it's important that we'll pick on back pain again or shoulder pain, that's going to come and go. And it's normal for that to happen. They need to continue to come so we can try to work through it and whatever, temporarily decrease their loads or their volume, and so we can continue to work towards their goal too. So
certainly. Now I'm going to bring it back to my Star Wars nerdiness. Obi-Wan Kenobi says only a Sith deals in absolutes. And you got to let the patients know that. It's not that on Monday I'm done with rehab and on Thursday I'm back to running 10 miles a time. So it's not a cut and dry in communicating all the different steps. So having a return to run program, having a return to gym program, something that you can give to them ready to go that they can follow in a stepwise manner.
Yeah.
That'll be very helpful.
You touched on a return to gym program. We're huge on that because I feel like it's really important to get the patient engaged, and they don't have to just be, we don't have to have tunnel vision and have patients just do what we think they should do. What does this patient want to do? Do they want to, join a walking club, or are they a mall walker? Do they like to ride their bike with their loved one, or what do they want to do? Try to get them involved with that, I think, is a really good next step. Yeah. Like in talking to discharge and bringing it up, keeping it at the front of their mind, your mind, and your goals minds too.
Yeah. The best form of exercise is the one that you like to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it might not be.
Pickleball is taking the country by storm right now. And that might be
no doubt
that they want to get into.
Yeah.
Might be yoga, might be Pilates. My neighbor across the street had her total knee done last summer, and her biggest goal is I need to get back to my Pilates group. So
Yeah.
that was huge for her getting back to that.
Oh
Where,
yeah. You know what? I'm glad you said that. That gives them a sense of community,
Mhm.
and they want that it's their friends. It's sometimes they're part of their identity and where they get a lot of quality of life. So
Absolutely.
that should be a huge goal of ours,
Mhm.
because when we are able to give that back to that patient, they're going to want to
Yeah.
come back and see us. They're going to recommend their friends and family, all those business
Mhm.
things, that I'm so worried about all too much,
Yeah. But
probably.
that also gives you a chance to turn them into, transition from a PT patient to a fitness client as well.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So we have the gym or personal training. We try to encourage one or the other or whatever. Option
Mhm.
three is if you already have a gym, that's great, or
Mhm.
another trainer or water aerobics with whoever, sit and be fit class. It's all good to me. I just want to
And
see them
I always
go do that.
encourage, if you don't know any of the personal trainers in your area, get to know some, because they might
Yeah.
want to. You might not have a gym in your facility. So, hey, when they're ready to be discharged and they want to get into a gym program, I have 2 or 3 different people that you can go see. And you know them well, you're marketing to them, because that might also be somebody that sends you patients as well. So you can send them clients and then they can send you patients. And if
Yeah.
they have somebody that gets an injury.
Good point. Happens every day with our clinic here. And we have a couple. We're fortunate enough to have a couple personal trainers that we work with closely, and I give
Mhm.
them some great coordination of care about, Susie, who's had a rotator cuff repair, still needs to work on side lying,
Certainly.
external rotation, as well with pressing movements too. But otherwise, do have a great full body workout otherwise. And it works
Absolutely.
very well. It works very well.
Hey, all you rehab specialists out there. Do you have an isokinetic dynamometer just sitting around your clinic not being used? Little known fact, isokinetic machines that aren't used regularly are at higher risk for bouts of sadness. Help your machine out and take CSMI's newest CEU course, Isokinetics 101 online, created by me, Daniel Bodkin, and learn how to use all the exercise and testing applications available on your machine. With new and exciting rehab techniques in your toolbox, your sad isokinetic machine can become an active member of the rehab team again and regain its happiness. Isokinetics 101 online by CSMI has been approved for 8 credit hours for athletic trainers, physical therapists, and physical therapy assistants. Contact your state board for details on specific requirements. This course is available at humacnorm.com/courses/isokinetics-101. So now let's transition over to talking athletes.
Smooth transition here. I like
Yeah,
it. Cool. Where
smooth
should we go first
operator.
with this, Daniel?
Well, I think the biggest thing is everybody focuses on the discharge, where they're at discharge, but
Yeah.
it all goes back to tracking them all throughout. So
Yeah.
if you have, we'll talk functional tests first, and we'll use something simple for some of your athletes. 4 weeks out, how many sit to stands can they do in 30 seconds? We think of that as a test for a geriatric population.
Very true.
But some of your athletes who they're early on in their ACL rehab, you can test them that way and then retest them, make sure they're progressing. Doing 30-second forward or lateral step downs, and you can get a bilateral comparison. That's maybe a few months later. I also like to use the t-test as we get more toward discharge,
That's good.
working just through all the different progressions in the clinic. If they haven't, if they're only on beginning agilities and plyometrics and they haven't went to some of the more medium to advanced stuff yet, they might not be ready to go back to their sport yet.
Yeah.
So just knowing where they are in their rehab journey.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's important that, like, initially, like, we're preparing this patient, like, listen, you've had a serious musculoskeletal injury, whether it be Achilles tendon repair, ACL, whatever. This is going to at least take 9 months, at least, or longer. And if we follow X, Y, and Z, depending on their testing. So there's really no option to go back before this time, because the odds are not in your favor, says the research, the science. So.
Just know that with functional testing, you can compensate for weak links. Tons of studies out there showing we'll just use ACLs again. They'll do the hop series and they will score 10% difference bilaterally. But when they look at it with motion analysis, force plates, and then they compare that to like a dynamometer test, they'll find that the people that have weakness, and it's usually specifically the quad, that they will compensate through their hip and their trunk to make up for those. And so they will look better than they really are if you're only doing functional tests.
No doubt.
I love the hop test. It's a good one, but by itself, it's measuring. A test assesses what it's assessing. And a hop test is assessing your ability to hop.
Yeah, I think it was the guys from Delaware Physical Therapy. I can't recall that just had a paper that pretty much said that the hop testing is not enough to clear someone to go back. No, and it makes sense too. But we see that time and time again, with a lot of orthopedic surgeons sometimes too. And I think that's where you and I can help. And we mentioned communicating earlier in earlier episodes too with the docs and just what we recommend. And so it's kind of a collaborative team effort too when we do get close to discharge.
The other side of the coin is the isolated muscle testing with either a handheld dynamometer or even better, isokinetic system. And most people do the standard concentric test. I'm a big proponent. I'm trying to spread my gospel of the concentric eccentric quadriceps and hamstrings test, because there's so much more information you're going to get out of that. But that's not the only thing. I test my ACL patients, or really any of my extremity patients. I test them all throughout their rehab, starting just from isometric testing, getting a baseline test, finding what a bilateral difference is, then retesting every 4 to 6 weeks to make sure that they're gaining strength appropriately. Because another great study came out. Can't tell you who did it. Maybe I'll figure that out and I'll link it down below or put a little a marker so you can find that. But it showed if you have a greater than 30% deficit LSI between the two quads at 3 months post-op, that's a major predictor of having not being able to meet that 10% difference on an isokinetic test at month 6. So you can identify them early on in the process. And sometimes I'll see that they're making great progress in the clinic with their functional exercises. And then we do the test and they've gained a ton of strength in their hamstring, but the quadricep has only gained minimal amount. And it's because they're overutilizing that posterior chain, or we're irritating their knee. We're pushing their knee a little bit too much. And it's inflamed, so the quadricep isn't gaining strength. So we got to make sure we're not over pushing them.
No doubt. And I can't agree more. It's letting testing guide your treatment is key, especially when you're trying to return someone to sport, because there's no protocol, there's no book written on it. It's not arbitrary, but there's a lot of factors that are involved with this. We're seeing a gal right now from a local university for ACL, and she's just having a terrible day. And I was wanting to progress her to running, her first day of running, and just running on the treadmill like at the slowest jog ever. And she looked off when I was like, "Are you okay? Are you ready for this?" And she was like, "I just had a death in my family and I just found out about it." So like that's real life, and that's going to happen, right? Athletes are going to go out and they're just going to get schmammer drunk sometimes the night and they're not going to perform.
Yeah, you'll have that too.
So and furthermore, if you have the testing, the objective testing too, like say that we got a hamstring that's 40% of the quad for ACL, we know we need to go to work on the hamstrings. Or that we got the force or the quad to body weight ratio. They're not even producing their body weight in their quad. We need to get both legs, the operative and the inoperative leg, stronger. That's easy stuff, but we wouldn't know if we didn't test.
We know that they're going to lose a lot of strength on that non-surgical leg. So tracking that throughout their plan of care too, making sure that leg's getting back is really important. And it's great because then you can show the patient their progress or their lack of progress or the fact that they
Yep.
still need more work, or you can reciprocate that back to the doctor and say they're not quite there yet. They need maybe another 6 weeks of a solid strength and conditioning program.
Yeah.
Working back into practice, maybe, doing drills with the team, or they're almost there. They've been practicing with the team. Their strength's getting better. Let's have them, if they're playing football, let's get them on special teams.
Yeah.
If they're another sport where they can sub in and out, maybe let's let them play, but we'll hold them out for 10 minutes. We'll let the other team fatigue a little bit, and then they can come in fresh. And as soon as they start to fatigue, they come out. Then we just start expanding the amount of time that they're in playing and their minutes on the court or the field.
Yeah. Yeah. Time is a good one. Good way to measure mileage. I've seen some studies use a pedometer to track, and they're slowly increasing.
Same thing with your pitchers. We were down in Tampa and had so many pitchers, and we would do the isokinetic testing on their shoulder. And, with ACLs, we always want the surgery leg to be 10% weaker than the non-surgery leg, right? But for the upper extremity, it's different. If I'm a right-handed thrower and my right arm is 10% weaker than my left arm, that's still pretty weak on this side. I need to bring that. I want it to be stronger than that non-operative side. Do I have an imbalance? Or my internal rotators way stronger than my external rotators? There's I think it's like the 60 to 70% ratio, just like at the hamstrings. But if you do that concentric eccentric test, like I'm a big proponent of, I can see is my internal rotators concentrically going to accelerate the ball in my arm, and are my eccentric external rotators going to be able to slow that arm back down? How close of a match is it? So a lot of data that you can get from that, and then you can combine that with your other functional tests, looking at their pitching program, their hitting program, building them back into their sport.
Yeah. So another thing, I remember what I was going to say. Sorry. A movement analysis. Those guys, I think it was University of Wisconsin. Like, you wouldn't do the same return to sport for a, we'll say, a soccer player who plays midfield that you would for the goalie. Because they're obviously the goalie going laterally a lot. And, the midfielder has to go all directions too. So for the goalie, you wouldn't want to train quite as much in the sagittal plane, more rotational, right to left sort of stuff. It was interesting, but I was half asleep for the further.
Yeah. And you can even go even further with it. Let's say you have a high school sophomore, or let's say high school junior, coming back from ACL. There's maybe three games left in the season, and it's 6 months, and they're borderline. Do I let her play in those last couple games?
Great point.
Knowing that the season's over, she's a junior. She's going to play summer league, and that's really where a lot of the more important things happen. Do I hold her out and just get her ready to be a beast in summer league? Or do I return her for those last couple games and risk re-tearing it? And now another year later, it's her senior season, she didn't get to play a lot of because she had to maybe she tore that same side or the other side. So there's a lot of context to it.
Yeah. Or maybe this person knows that maybe they're a senior, and maybe they know that they're not going to go on to play pro. They're not going to go to grad school and play another redshirt year. So they want to risk it. They want to, because they know another surgery, and it's worth it to me. So,
let's say they're in college and they get a chance. They're borderline. Do you let them play to maybe get them into the NFL combine? Or are they a pro soccer player and their career is playing soccer? So if they can get back at the end of the season and get some good stats, or get any stats, that might be beneficial for them.
On that same breath there, like your starting point, like, because we just got another kid for ACL, and he hurt his leg. He described it as drunk cage fighting. So he was, I do not recommend that. But a buddy practiced a move on him when they were both drinking, had some beers in them, and pow, went the new knee lock and torn ACL. So, but anyway,
there's one last thing I forgot to mention too. We mentioned testing them, isokinetic tests, or even your functional tests. everybody does it when they're fresh and warmed up. What about, doing that test, finding where they are, and if they're borderline, then you bring them back in a couple days later, work them out for a solid 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and then do your return to sport test. How are they going to operate when they're fatigued? Because that's when they're more likely going to hurt themselves.
Yeah, that's when an injury is going to happen at late in the second half, the fourth quarter, when they're likely to fatigue, and that those numbers are dropping slowly. But yeah, so
the overriding answer, how do we know when our patients are ready? It depends.
It depends. It depends.
But you have objective measurements. You have measurements you can do with functional testing, whether it's, a triple hop test or just replicating. Can they kneel down on their knee after a total knee to try to garden? Can they kneel there for 10 to 15 minutes and actually do the task? Can they actually perform their sport in drills? And then you have your isolated muscle testing with isokinetic testing or with handheld dynamometry. And you have to paint the picture of that patient with all their other contexts going into it. And that's how you arrive at that decision.
I agree. Just one thing to add to that is like just talking to them about how confident they are for discharge, how they're feeling about it, make sure they're prepared for it. Maybe questionnaires are a good thing. The more it kind of builds your case towards discharge to help the patient feel confident. And a plan, what's your plan after this? What are you going to be doing? Are you going to continue in the gym with squats, deadlifts, step ups, heavy knee extensions after ACL, with your strength and conditioning coach at your university or school? Or are you going to get back into, gardening? What's the example, so, or personal training or gym membership. So something along those lines. So I think that's a good summary.
Yeah. Good ending point. And be on the lookout. We got some guests coming up. I promise they're coming. I'm really excited. We have a guest that we're going to interview at the end of this week for the podcast. And I'm really excited for her. She's a beast in the PT rehab world. So I'm excited for that one.
She's got a couple specializations I don't know anything about too. So I'm really curious to pick her brain too.
Absolutely.
All right. Great.
Well, thank you everybody for listening. Go ahead and like us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever medium you're listening to us on, and share, tell your friends, and maybe it can grow the podcast a little bit more.
Yeah. Sounds good. And we will catch up with you guys later this week.
Next week.
All right. See ya.